Okay, we're going to start notes over the Indus River Valley Civilization, and this can be found in Chapter 2, Section 3 of your text. In class, we've been talking about different river valley civilizations that have developed around different rivers. We talked about Mesopotamia, we've talked about Egypt, and now we're going to go into the Indus River. We're going to move geographically over into Southeast Asia, which is now modern-day India, as you can see on this map. We're going to talk about the cities and the civilizations that popped up right here in the Indus River Valley. This river right here is the Indus River, and this is the Ganges River, and this is kind of where this fertile plain of land developed, and there was river valley civilizations that popped up. Little is known about the Indus River Valley civilization. Actually, historians there's a lot of mystery surrounding, but what they do know are a few key things that developed the River Valley civilization. Like I said, little is known about the origins of this River Valley civilization, and little is known about their decline. It's located in modern-day India in the Indian subcontinent, and as you guys can see from the map, and if you want to look at a better map on page 42 in your text, you can see that India was surrounded by mountain ranges. They're surrounded by the Hindu Kush Mountains, the Himalaya Mountains. They also are surrounded by deserts in the west. And so the peninsula that juts out is known as the Indian subcontinent. And the Indus River Valley is kind of located right there in that river valley plain that I showed you in the orange on the last map. The climate that dominates this area is is monsoons. They get seasonal monsoons. Dry winds come across from the northeast. They blow dry air across the country. And then in the middle of June, around the springtime, the winds start to shift and the spring monsoons come in from the southwest, which bring moisture and great rains. So they have a rainy season in the spring. So that kind of controls their climate and dominates their environment. Interesting thing about the Indus River Valley, which is different from the Egyptians that we talked about, is they had unpredictable flooding. They do have the same kind of challenges that Mesopotamia and Egypt has. They do experience flooding, but unlike Egypt, the Indus River was very unpredictable in its flooding. The same as the river does bring the same fortune as the other rivers and the other river valleys that we've talked about. It spreads deposits that create fertile soil over the area. However, like I said before, these floods were unpredictable. The Indus River could also change its course, which would cause problems for the people living in the Indus River Valley. Also, the monsoons, they were very unpredictable as well. These people had to cope with this cycle of wet and dry seasons. And if there was not enough rain, then the plants would suffer. But if there was too much rain, then the floods would come in and wipe away all their plants and wipe away their crops and eventually destroy all their villages. The Indus River Valley was surrounded by natural barriers, like we talked about. The Hindu Kush and the Himalayan mountains were to the north, and the deserts were to the west. So it protected them from invaders a lot better than if they didn't have those natural barriers. Also, the Indus River kind of provided a way for the people living in this Indus River Valley civilization to get to the ocean. So that supported trade, and they were able to develop relationships with distant peoples, which we will get to, and we'll see evidence of that in the future. Okay, the Indus River Valley, like we said, historians think that people started planning cities around 2500 BC. There was evidence that about by 3200 BC there were people farming along the villages along the Indus River, but actually they believe the cities began to be built around 2500 BC. Archaeologists have found the ruins of about 100 settlements, but the largest cities that were found along the Indus River, at the ruins were the cities of Kalibangan, Mohenjo-Daro, and Harappa. And a lot of times this area, this entire civilization was called the Harappan River Valley Civilization because there were a large number of ruins, and archaeologists have found lots of artifacts at the city of Harappa. Those are the three largest cities that are found. This picture up here is a picture of Mohenjo-Daro, and if you notice, their cities are built around this large structure. Their cities were actually set up on a grid system. They had exquisite city planning, and they also were centered around what is known as a citadel, which is kind of like a central fortified area, and it contained all the major buildings of the city. They did have separate residential districts, and the buildings were made out of these oven-baked bricks that were cut in like standard sizes. And they didn't have like the more simple, irregular, not quite as perfect mud bricks that the Mesopotamians had. So this kind of architecture and this city planning kind of showed that the Indus River Valley civilization did have some kind of strong central government, and that they did have some kind of city planning, and they had some complex institutions. They also had a very sophisticated plumbing and sewage system built into their cities, which also suggests that they had strong central government and they had the means and the technology to carry that out, which is interesting. In your textbook, if you would like to see on page 44, there's a great it's a picture of what that plumbing might have looked like. And it's interesting to think that some of those things that we didn't even have in our civilization until about the 19th, 20th century, these early civilizations were trying to feature and experiment with. So this Indus River Valley had some very high-end technology, and so it shows that they had some sophistication. The Indus civilization was a stable civilization. That suggests that they found things like toys for their children. So that shows that they had a prosperous society, and they didn't always have to make essential goods all the time. There was very few weapons of warfare found. That means that there probably wasn't a whole lot of conflict going on. Also, religious artifacts were found that pointed that they probably had some kind of Hindu culture, and they had the different religious relics that might have pointed that these people worshiped some kind of Hindu society. And we'll talk more about the Hindu culture in the coming up weeks. Also, they had stamps and seals that were made out of stone, and that shows that they were trading with each other. These stamps and seals were used to identify their goods, and these were found on other civilization, at other civilizations' grounds, other civilizations' ruins. So that shows that they had contact with other civilizations, and that they engaged in long-distance trading. So that kind of shows that the Indus River civilization, while there's little known, we can devise that they did trade, that they had a prosperous society, and that they had artifacts that point to religious relics. About 1750 BC, the quality of the Indus River civilization started to decline, and it's pretty unknown why. However, there's a couple theories. First of all, the first theory is that the rivers changed course and the floods were no longer flooding and fertilizing the fields near the cities, which would cause problems in farming. The land wouldn't be as fertile, and people wouldn't be able to sustain themselves agriculturally anymore. Another theory is that they overgrazed the land. It was overfarmed, overcut the trees, made it to where the land was no longer sustainable anymore. And another theory would be an invasion or some kind of natural disaster or an attack. Some archaeologists found 38 bodies at Mohenjo-Daro that were never buried. So that could point to some kind of invasion or attack. It's really unknown on why the Indus River Valley civilization declined, But what they do know and what they have found shows that this was a relatively advanced society with well-planned cities and advanced artifacts and technology. Okay, that wraps up our notes over the Indus River Valley civilization. If you have any questions or you want to tie up any loose ends, please feel free to come see me, and I would love to discuss that with you. Also, you can consult Chapter 2, Section 3 in your text that discusses the Indus River Valley civilization as well. Be sure and be ready for a quiz over this information whenever I see you next. All right.